I'm Emma Louise Coffey and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy Podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. On this week's show, we're focusing on dairy cow genetics. I caught up with Morgan O'Sullivan, PhD researcher from Teagasc Moor Park, who is monitoring the performance of the next generation herd.
The EBI, or Economic Breeding Index, is the index in Ireland that dairy farmers use to select the animals that will become the parents of the next generation of dairy animals on their farm. And I suppose what elite refers to is that elite represents the top 1% of the within breed on the basis of EBI, and that's the Holstein Friesian breed. So the animals within the study were exclusively Holstein Friesian, and I guess they're firmly within the top 1% of the breed, while the national average animals are a representative group of cows that represent what is out there on dairy farms presently. So, we assembled a group of 90 heifers back in 2012, which were sourced from dairy farms across the country and also from within Teagasc herds. And these animals, we targeted the top 5% of dairy females ranked on the basis of EBI, and also targeted a cohort group of national average animals. And these animals went forward and calved down in 2013 for the first year of this research study, and all heifers were genotyped to verify their parentage and their EBI value. So essentially, what it means is that we put together a group of elite animals that are estimated to be at least 2 generations ahead of the current national herd on the ground. And what that allows us to do is to future-proof the index, to take a forward view of selection on the implications of selection on the basis of EBI, and where our national herd will be in 10 years' time by selecting and continue to select in the manner which we are selecting on through EBI. So I guess EBI is made up of milk production, fertility, calving, beef, maintenance, management and health. So those are the various sub-indexes of the EBI, and essentially what it is trying to do is breed a profitable cow for dairy farmers.
Great. And in euro terms, Morgan, so if we're talking about the average cow and your elite cow that's in the top 1%, what does that mean in a euro value for EBI?
Yes, so I suppose the euro value, so the difference in EBI is 154 euros is the mean EBI value of the elite animals versus 51 in the national average. So that's a difference of approximately 100 euros in EBI value. And I guess EBI is expressed in terms of genetics of the animal. So the animal will pass on half of her genetic potential for a particular trait to her progeny. So essentially EBIs are predicted transmitting abilities. So what EBIs are, if a cow has an EBI of 100 euros, that means that she will on average deliver 200 euros more profit. However, she will be contributing half of her genetics, as we know, half in any parentage schematic, an animal or a mother will pass on half of their genetics to the progeny. Likewise, the bull will pass on half of their genetics to the progeny. So, the differences we're seeing in EBI are 100 euros, and it makes the two groups very, very distinct from each other. And
when you say 100 euro, there's a 100 euro difference. Is that mainly made up of, say, the milk sub-index, fertility sub-index, or what is that accounted for?
Yeah, so look, I suppose the elite animals are elite for a reason, and they are elite for all of the various sub-indexes. And particularly, milk sub-index, the average milk sub-index of the elite animals is 37 euros versus 17 for the national average. And I guess fertility is a real area where the differences arise. And the average fertility sub-index of the elite animals is 80 euros versus 13 in the national average. And I guess, the key point here is that the index was designed back in 2001 to drive genetic gain for fertility performance. Past selection in Ireland, selection aggressively for solely on milk production, resulted in, large declines and well-documented declines in the fertility of the national herd. So what EBI is doing is selecting aggressively for fertility, and the weighting on fertility is 35%. So fertility accounts for 35% of the total index of EBI. And that's quite high. I mean, relative to other countries, if you take, for example, a counterpart of ours in a similar production system, grass-based system, New Zealand, I mean, fertility is accounting for about 15% of their index. So, it was a brave move at the time, and it's really showing dividends in light of the performance of this herd and the trends we're seeing from the national herd.
So just to sum up on that, you have 100 euro of an EBI difference between your elite and your average cows. 20 euro of that is made up of milk, and 65 is made up of the fertility. Moving on then, in terms of the performance, you measured performance over a 4-year period. What are you seeing in terms of differences in milk yield or milk constituents? Is there a difference between the two breeds?
Yeah, so there is. So, milk yield is actually lower in the elite cows. Within the index is selecting for a cow with less milk because there's an antagonistic genetic relationship identified previously between high volume or high milk production potential and fertility performance. The EBI actually places a negative weighting on or a negative economic value on milk, additional milk volume transmitted from a parent. So, and that also reflects the payment system that's operated in Ireland for milk. We're paid on what's an A plus B minus C system. So we're paid on the value of our kilograms of protein followed by fat. And there's actually a negative charge of minus 4 cent a litre on milk volume. So that very much reflects, I suppose the absolute difference in milk production reflects what the EBI is doing. But I guess, critically, the constituents of the elite cows are significantly higher. I mean, you're, on average, 4.47 fat and 3.72 protein was the average production over the 4 years in terms of milk constituents of the elite animals versus 4.19 fat and 3.55 protein. So that actually lends itself to increased milk solids production of 9 kilograms per cow from the elite animals. That's where the differences lie in terms of productivity between the two groups.
Okay, and then fertility. We acknowledge the importance of fertility within the EBI breeding of the cow, and also fertility is crucial to the type of system we have here in Ireland, a seasonal system. Can you talk through the breeding at the Kilworth farm for the next generation? Are you doing 6 weeks AI and 6 weeks of a bull, or what is the system?
So I guess what we're using is 6 weeks of AI followed by 6 weeks of natural service from stock bulls. So, best practice is adhered to, and I suppose we would implement a period of about 3 weeks of pre-breeding where all cows are tail painted and, observe for heat detection. So, as it is a research herd, there is no interference. Animals are scanned pre-breeding and animals are scanned 30 days post-service and 60 days post-service with a final scan at 150 days.
What are you seeing in terms of empty rates in these cows, the elites versus the average cows?
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of empty rates over the 4 years, on average we've seen an 8% empty rate in the elite versus a 19% empty rate in the national average. So 92% of our elite cows have gone back in calf each year, which is excellent performance. And we're targeting less than 10% of our herd empty, so it's excellent performance. And I suppose just to backtrack on the breeding side of things, so we would be using a team of high EBI bulls, the highest EBI available, and those would be predominantly genomic selection bulls. And we would be using a team of 8 to 9, maybe even 10 bulls to ensure a wide range of specific sire lines are used on the cows. And this is reflecting what is being done at national level. I mean, we see at national level, in excess of 70% of semen sold is from genomically selected bulls. So, obviously it's in keeping with what is going on. I mean, we're not preferentially treating the elite animals versus the national average in terms of, what bulls are used and what genetic gain we'll get there.
To follow on from that, Morgan, in terms of your 8% empty in your elites and your 19% empty in your national average, what is the effect then on replacement rate and, in terms of the number of cows in the group that reaches mature status in terms of fourth lactation? Yeah,
so I guess, a key point is that over the course of the study, we actually controlled the parity structure of both herds. So we implemented the same replacement rate in both the elite and national average. So, for example, if the national average group had an empty rate of, for argument, say 25%, we had to replace 25% or introduce 25% heifers in the elite herd also. And that was due to the design of the study. I mean, we need to have a fair comparison of milk production, etc., and even parity groups. It makes it difficult, in scientific terms in research terms to tease out those differences if the herd is unbalanced. So, we saw a difference of 8% empty in the elite, a 19% empty rate in the national average. So I guess if we apply that logic to what would happen at a commercial farm, those were our empty rates, and we factor in a 10% voluntary culling rate of the remaining animals. That will lead to a replacement rate of 17% in the elite herd versus 27% in the national average herd. So again, our elite herd are on par with our target, less than 18% optimal replacement rate. However, our national average are well above that. So, and I guess following on from that, the parity structure that would develop is that you'll see a lot more parity 3+ animals in an elite herd, in a herd of elite EBI, given those differerences we've seen.
Great, Morgan. And in terms of voluntary culling, you mentioned a 10% figure. What are you culling these animals on?
Yeah, so I guess, look, voluntary culling in any farm system would, consist of culling on reasons such as, high cell count, persistent case of mastitis, lameness, poor feet and legs, etc., and maybe to a lesser degree temperament. So, and I guess, voluntary culling is a prudent action to take within a herd.
In terms of the economic analysis of your elite and your average cows, what are you seeing in euro terms?
Yeah, so I suppose, what we're seeing is, given the replacement rate that was implemented that I spoke about previously, we saw, I suppose, identical production in terms of milk volume or milk production, and that's down to the fact that we have more mature animals performing in the simulated elite herd due to the lower replacement rate of 17%. We're seeing obviously higher constituents. That trend carries through, and what we see is an actual differential in milk solids production per cow of 30 kilos per solids, and that is leading to increased milk sales to the tune of approximately 16,000 euros. So the net effect of this, given that we have lower numbers of replacements coming in, replacement costs are also lower, so that's having an impact on our total costs. So we have higher revenue from increased milk sales and also from increased value. I mean, given the constituents that we're seeing in these elite animals, the differential there is approximately 3 cents per litre in favour of milk from elite animals. So they're producing more valuable milk. And I suppose, the net effect in farm profit is 24,000 euros, which over a 110 cow herd, as we have modelled it on, is the equivalent of 220 euros per cow. And that very much ties in with the fact that, there was a 100 euro difference in EBI value between the two groups. And, from previous research, we are aware that each €1 increase in herd EBI is the equivalent to €2 profit realised on the ground.
Can you outline the main differences you have seen between the elite and average cows?
Yeah, so what we see, the main differences are greater body condition score in the elite cows. They're a lighter cow with a lower live weight, display greater milk composition, and resultantly are achieving higher milk price paid for their milk, greater fertility performance, and the key point is greater survival levels to fifth lactation. We followed the cows that first came on the study in 2013, who had the potential of 4 full lactations, and what we saw, having done a survival analysis on these animals, having tracked their performance and movements over the 4-year period, we see that 57% of the elite animals calved down in 2017 at the start of their fifth lactation versus only 36% of the national average.
Thank you, Morgan.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast. My thanks to Morgan O'Sullivan for joining me on the show. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, and for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma Louise Coffey. Join me next time for your Dairy Edge.